Hello again, sweet darlings. Welcome back to another video. I'm here in front of our newly renovated kitchen. Part of that has been keeping our family very busy, so forgive me that there's been such a break between this video and my last interview with Sister Loretta-Maria of the Habit Forming Sisters, but I'm really pleased to introduce this video. We had a great discussion, which I've split into two parts just for easy watching for you, about how to incorporate elements of Carmel at home. This was the topic that Sister suggested when we did our first interview, because apparently she gets a lot of questions about how people can do this. And I think Carmelite spirituality and obviously the lives of saints like St Therese really appeal to Catholics, modern Catholics. At least that seems to be experienced since entering the church. And I have to say that I found this conversation really, really informative. It wasn't the things that I expected. When I asked Sister, what things can I start to bring into my life, or anybody can bring into their life from the charism of St Teresa of Avila, I really thought that she was going to say something like, you need to read these books, or, having a brown scapular, or, praying more rosaries, something like that. I suppose something a little bit more complicated, but actually what we discussed, I think, was a bit more profound and is definitely something that anybody can do. You don't need to be buying anything. You don't really need to be taking anything on or adding something to your day. It's actually about removing things from your day, removing distractions and noise in order to incorporate a little bit of Carmel into your home church. So I really hope that you enjoy this first part of our interview, and then part two will be coming out hopefully next week. So without further ado, let's jump into the interview. And if you have any questions for Sister, please do drop them in the comments and I'll be sure to pass them on. So welcome everybody, welcome back to another video. We are so lucky to have Sister Loretta-Maria from the Habit Forming Sisters back on this channel for another interview. This time with a very interesting topic, which I think you guys will enjoy, especially those of you who follow me who are homemakers and are interested in kind of Carmelite spirituality, bringing that into your home. Because Sister is going to talk directly to that. How can we as moms, as wives, as kind of busy people in a modern world bring elements of Carmel into our house? Is it manageable? What do we need to do? Is it going to be difficult? How can we get our kids involved? So that's really what this video is about, is just to kind of pick Sister Loretta-Maria's brains a little bit about how we can do that, what resources she'd recommend, and I'm definitely going to be very much looking forward to this one because I think I'm going to learn a lot personally for how I can do this. It's something that's kind of seemed like that's for other people, maybe. But without further ado, I'll let Sister just kind of briefly introduce herself. We have got another video on this channel, which I'll link below if you'd like to watch our first interview together, which is a little bit more about the very important work that Sister and her community are doing in the US, currently based in Georgia, but soon to be hopefully in Florida, where they're building a traditional monastery. So I will let you give a little bit more detail about that, Sister, and then we'll jump into our questions, if that's all right.
Yes. Well, praise be Jesus Christ. I'm Sister Loretta-Maria, the Carmelite nun. And yes, as Elizabeth said, we're building a monastery in High Springs, Florida, just down the street from the famous Florida Springs. So we feel like this will be a wonderful location to have a traditional Catholic retreat for families, to come visit the nuns, pray with us, hopefully, God willing, have some Latin Mass, and then go down the street to go visit those springs. So it's a wonderful little rural country location. Our neighbors have cows. I'm so excited. Anyway.
And you hope to have one of your own one day.
God willing. He'll answer my prayer if it's his will. I just keep praying. That's my little tiny baby prayer for myself every day. Lord, can I please have just one little cow? Anyway, that's...
And so, Sister, obviously I've got a list of questions to work through, which I think kind of will help guide us through how people can bring Carmel into their home. But before we talk about Carmel specifically, I did just want to ask you, because for myself as someone who's a Catholic convert, obviously a lot of this idea of kind of incorporating any of these elements of these kind of religious orders or charisms and kind of these, I suppose, like in my mind, like deeper teachings of the saints, kind of to me as a layperson, I think, well, maybe that's a little bit inaccessible. That's for other people. But even if people weren't looking specifically into Carmelite spirituality, what do you think are the benefits or the reasons why people should look into bringing elements of one of those orders into their life as lay people, because obviously, there's the Dominicans and the Franciscans, and there's lots of different orders to choose from that you could incorporate. So why should people do that in the first place?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is how I was always taught that monasteries, whether they're Carmelite, Franciscan, Dominican, etc., monasteries are supposed to be this sacred place in the world, out of the world, where people can look into them, look at them, and say, "What does the Catholic Church believe? What does the Catholic Church practice?" And that is what the nuns, the priests, the monks, whoever they are, that is what they're supposed to be doing, safekeeping and safeguarding the traditions of the Church. And different orders have different charisms, and that's basically just a special kind of lifestyle. And so they are all maintaining, safekeeping that tradition that God has given to these orders through their founders and foundresses. For example, us Carmelites, God gave the Carmelite spirituality actually from the beginning with Saint Elijah on the mountain, which relates to our call to pray without ceasing and to pray not in the world but out of the world, and then enclosure, and pray. That prayer comes with silence. Silence help us keep our prayer by helping us to be free from distractions that a lot of times come from excessive talking or excessively being in the presence of different people all the time. And then this charism continued into our the foundress of our the Reformation of the Carmelite order, St Teresa of Avila and St John of the Cross, who perfected more the idea of we are hermits who pray together as a community, and this community is specifically devoted to Our Lady. So a lot of our prayer is focused on Mary as our model, as the person that we look to emulate, and following her way of life through, especially her sorrows as well as her joys, but her sorrows on the cross, at Calvary with her son on the cross, because that is the mountain that Mount Carmel is supposed to be reflecting. So yes, our and these charisms, um, the monasteries are safekeeping them specifically so that people out in the world can look into the monastery and see, oh, silence is a virtue.
Mm.
Oh, prayer to Our Lady and devotion to her, that is, one of the main ways to get to salvation. So we're all safekeeping these very important traditions of the Catholic Church, and specifically Carmel has its own different flavors or
Mm-hmm.
charisms, you could say.
So would you then say that, like, because I think that's a really good explanation of what all of those different orders would have in common. So, would you feel then, from your own experience as a Carmelite nun, that you would have a lot in common with nuns of other orders in terms of, you know, as you say, like, the virtues and those kind of like core elements of your life in a religious order, but your day, your schedule would look a little bit different?
Yes, in a sense, every different order, like the Franciscans, Benedictines, Dominicans, Carmelites, we all have the same focus of acquiring virtue, to defeat vice and thus get ourselves on the way to heaven. But everyone has like a different mode or way of doing so. So Carmelites as a contemplative order, we're very much considered more of like austere in the sense of normally we are kept away from the world. Like we do not come out of the monastery for any reason except for an emergency, or yeah, just an emergency. We have the grills and keep ourselves even away from when visitors come, and that creates the desert of Carmel, like because there's a spiritual reality that Carmel is not just a mountain but a desert, because we have stripped this place of everything related to the world. And different contemplative monasteries that are not Carmelite may not be as austere as that, and they may not have the kind of silence that we do. For example, actually, the Carthusians, and they have nuns, but I've known of the Carthusian monks who basically don't talk except for like Sunday. You know what I mean? Like, we do have times during the day when we talk, but we're not that extreme. So they have a whole different understanding of silence than our practice of it. But yes, everyone, in a sense, is trying to keep um, these specific virtues and it's kind of hard to explain, put them forth in a, like I said, a different charism, a different way of translating the virtues for other people to witness so that they can imitate them in at least small ways in their own life.
Yeah, and I think that that makes total sense, and that is very important when you think about the great variety that we are in people. You know, whether you're
Right.
someone who's religious or someone who is a member of the laity, we are all different. So that's why I could see that there would be people who wouldn't be called, say, to like try to emulate Carmelite spirituality, or even like some of their favorite saints might have nothing to do with Carmel. Maybe they're aware of it, but they just haven't kind of felt drawn to that in the same way that they felt drawn to say like Saint Benedict and the Benedictine monks, and maybe it also has something to do with like what would be in your local area. Like if you met, an order that was in your local area, regardless of what order they were, you probably would just get close to that and maybe drawn into that in a way because they're part of
Yes.
the community. A couple of things stood out that you just said. I think, the silence, obviously, we talked about last time, and that seems to be like a big thing that, I mean, it's a challenge for everybody, but that would be something that, anyone could say, okay, well, how could I incorporate like a little bit more silence into my day? And I think so many people now are recognizing the importance for that, and not just people who are Christian or Catholic, but just generally that this noise in the world, we're also
Yeah.
distracted. Like we need to have music on, we need to have a podcast on, and we're trying in a way to be like overly productive. Like, oh well, I can clean the house, but I can also use that time to listen to a podcast, and so we're never just quiet, like in our thoughts or in prayer, and then you kind of have to set time aside to pray. And I know I've had conversations with mums kind of at local Catholic mums groups, and so many of the questions have come up when we've been speaking to the father there who runs it, like, well, I read, I remember one mum saying, I read the advice of the saints and of like certain Catholic writers about, well, you should spend this amount of time in prayer, or you should kind of try to reach this level of prayer or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. And she was saying when she was reading it, she was thinking that that was just accessible for guys. She was saying, how can I,
Mm-hmm.
as a woman, like as a mom and a wife, how can I carve out that amount of time? um,
Yes.
and the priest, made the point like, well, you know, obviously some women choose to reframe it that like everything you do could be a prayer. Like while you're doing the dishes, that's a prayer. You're kind of
Mm-hmm.
serving Jesus by serving your family. If you can reframe it that way, which sometimes is easy and sometimes isn't so
Yes.
easy. Um, so yeah,
Yes.
definitely that silence struck me in what you said just now, and it struck me before as well, because it's not easy. It's so kind of counter to the world we live in. And the other thing was, you were saying kind of how you pray together as a community, and I'm just
Yes.
kind of curious how, say someone in the laity, like how could you incorporate that in your life? Me as someone who's a convert, I'm kind of vaguely aware of groups that might get together as the laity to
Mm-hmm.
pray for a specific thing. Um, but maybe now would be a good time to kind of move on to like whether there are specific elements of Carmel that you would recommend people start with trying to incorporate. It might be what I've just mentioned, it might be something totally different, into their life to kind of draw closer to God, I suppose, and find that peace and
Yes.
emulation of Our Lady as well.
Yes. So let me start with the silence first, because a quote from our Carmelite rule came to me, which was, "Sin is not found wanting, where there is much talk. And boy, do I know that. Anyway, so that's a very good line to keep in mind. Sin is not found wanting where there is much talk. And you can incorporate that as a lay person in your life by just being more reflective about the conversations you have, or even like before you start, like what you want to say, like actually have some reflection, like, is what I'm going to say edifying for this person to hear and for myself to be saying? Is this like something that will benefit us spiritually, or just benefit us in a good friendship way? Like, there's so many times where we have conversations in life, and we're just talking for the sake of talking, or making the small talk, or just trying to talk about worldly things that really don't matter, that really don't affect us in any way. We just, oh, did you hear the news about so and so? And that line from the rule is supposed to emphasize the idea that, you know, when you are silent, you can't sin by your tongue. So it's just this understanding that I don't have to talk, and I don't have to, like, put myself forth in conversation, just to like make me feel good, or is what I'm trying to say going to edify this person and myself? And that's more like related to conversations out in the world. But you can also practice that in your family life. I just assume that maybe there's a lot of with husbands and wives and the things they say to each other. Yeah, maybe we shouldn't have said that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, there's a lot of, because I hear from different people with prayer requests, like, oh, I was arguing with my husband, we're having a hard time and whatever. And a lot of it just comes into, yes, sin is not found wanting where there is much talk. And that's good for the children also to understand, because as a child, when I wanted to be a nun and I was reading about the rule of Carmel, I was really trying to practice that. And it's so hard because by nature, I'm a very talkative person. Let's talk about whatever. I don't care. It's just fun to talk. So, why the Lord asked me to be a Carmelite nun, I'm still discerning why. I just know, yes, this is 100% what He wants me to do. It's just, are you sure you wanted the talkative nun, like, to be a Carmelite nun? Anyway. So, and as a child, I tried to practice that. Like, when I went to public school, it's really awful. I'm so like happy to hear when children are home don't know the horror stories that I know. Anyway, so I tried to practice that in school with all my crazy public non-Catholic and probably heathen friends, and not having the conversations that they were looking for, but trying to talk about things that were edifying or related to something that was going to help us socially, intellectually, etc. So that's one thing to keep in mind when it comes to practicing silence in the world. And then going to prayer, yes, what that priest was mentioning about, when you do the dishes, you can make that into a prayer. That's basically Teresa of Avila. She has a quote, and I love this quote so much. She said, "Find Jesus in the pots and the pans when you're working." And I love that.
I never heard that before. That is good.
So now, this is me as a little novice in the monastery. I was like meditating on that for what she said while I was in the kitchen. And okay, this is a really weird story. So I'm like washing pots and pans because it was my turn. And I'm like thinking about that. Find Jesus in the pots and pans. Yeah, right. And then, okay, this is where like, I'm just really silly. All of a sudden I looked at the pot and it's in the shape of a circle, right? And I was like, oh, the circle, like the Eucharist. And I went and told my prioress. I was like, I found Jesus in the pots and pans. It's the circle. It's in the
All of the
Eucharist circle. So
all
I
the pans
told,
are a circle.
yeah, it's like I discovered the magic whatever. And she just looked at me and she's like, now did you finish the pots? I'm like, no, I didn't. Okay, let me go back. And then she said, can you like tell me that during recreation instead of breaking my silence? And I was like, okay. So that's me as a novice. I'm just like trying to figure this whole thing out. And yeah. So then, yeah, when I was doing the pots, I was like nicely cleaning those circles, like, Jesus, I love you. Anyway, so that's, you know, you can. So I'm a very happy little nun where I just feel like life of prayer and spiritual life and, you know, going to church is fun. So I'm very extroverted. And once again, Jesus, why'd you make the extroverted talkative nun a Carmelite nun? Anyway, so in that sense, with great joy, you know, and cheer, whatever you're doing, you can make a meditation out of it. Even like when you're sweeping the floor, vacuuming the floor, you can like meditate. Imagine Our Lady when she was in Nazareth and, you know, caring for that little home for Jesus and Joseph, what she was doing, you know, dusting, sweeping the floor, you know, mopping the floor, and just imagine her with you. And then, you know, it doesn't become such a drudgery, a chore anymore. It's like, you know, oh, I'm helping the queen clean up Nazareth for the little baby Jesus's feet as he comes by. You know, you just, you know, if you can use your imagination, you can meditate. And then for those of the population who are not imaginative, if you can think abstractly, you can still meditate, because there's two kinds of meditations. There's the imaginative and the intellectual. So sometimes, and I have like very imaginative mind. Like I can imagine a unicorn sitting right here while we're having this meeting. Like it's easy. So, but for those who don't have the imagined mind, intellectual meditation, you know, you can think of the concepts of like charity and what does charity mean and how do people, you know, use charity, you know, in their life. How do we be charitable to others? So you can still take concepts and do that. And even like when you're doing the dishes, just in your mind, have those kinds of intellectual thoughts about pick a virtue and just think about it, or you can even like pick a scene from like the Passion of Christ. And like, so I'm a nurse, so I would intellectually sometimes think about the wounds of Christ and like what he was going through, like with, you know, his suffering. And I did this in nursing school a lot. We were learning about, you know, the circulatory system and platelets and blood clots and whatever. And I was like, the whole time thinking about Jesus, like, oh my goodness gracious, like that's what happened. Like, you know, so you can take that's how you intellectually meditate. But otherwise, I just really, I'm into the imaginative meditation. Like, oh, look at the pot. It's a circle, like the Eucharist. I love the Eucharist. Anyway. So that's how you can pray without ceasing. And that's what Carmelites are all about. Anything we do, even like, you know, you're going to go to sleep tonight, like you have a little meditation of like something like baby Jesus is in the manger and now I'm going to go into my manger. Good night, Jesus. So, or Jesus, some of the very melancholic sisters like to do Jesus is in the tomb. I am going to practice practice my death by going to sleep. And I just go, okay, sisters, that's
each to
fine.
their own.
To each their own. I wanted
if that
the
helps
baby
you sleep, then
yeah, that helps you sleep. You know, I mean, during Lent I will do that, but you know, it's after the Ascension. Come on. Anyway.
Yeah, it is a great time. Definitely, you know, the second year of, second full year of being a Catholic and the Easter Vigil and stuff, just understanding it a lot more. I was like, I really felt that anticipation, like the deep, you know, sadness and loss, you know, on Friday,
Yeah.
and then just like that anticipation, but like such a secure anticipation, like knowing that he, you know, he is risen. You know, I can't really imagine kind of, you know, everybody who was there on the Friday and then not knowing whether he was going to rise or not, probably not even imagining that he was going to. Anyway, that's a side point. I did want to just quickly interject with what you were saying about the silence, because this just kind of makes me think about stuff that I was taught growing up. And I think a lot of, well, I think men and women struggle with it, but I think a lot of kind of women, it's very difficult now. And this is something that I'm struggling with, especially now becoming a Catholic, like recognizing that Our Lady is the model, for women
Right.
and femininity. And there's so much in her life that kind of, you're called to try to emulate that goes against kind of what you're taught or encouraged in the modern world as young women. Like, well, definitely like make sure that you have your say and don't be a wallflower and don't be shy. And I was just thinking about the conversations, like the whole idea of not actually telling people what you think, or just being quiet, or like not, if someone else is gossiping, it's okay just to be quiet or to walk away, or not to get involved. I think that's so counter to what a lot of women are kind of being encouraged to do now. And I think it's kind of like being encouraged, or at least kind of what I see in like the laity, not just in Catholics, obviously, just like in the world as a whole, is like to show that you're clever. There's so much focus on like,
Mm-hmm.
well, have you got something intelligent to say? Can you make a comment about the news?
Exactly.
And I think that's an excellent point that you make, that actually, is any of that really that important?
Necessary.
Is it?
Thinking about other people and talking about other people's lives.
Mm,
Not really. And
yeah.
even like when it comes to politics, like as a nun, like my whole focus is so and so pro life and going to save the babies, or
Mm,
is he going to murder them? Because that is the only thing in this day and age that actually matters.
yeah.
Like, I understand, you know, global politics and World War III and all this stuff. But this is what Jesus had mentioned. Like, when you hear rumors of wars and
Mm,
uprisings and disasters, these things must come,
yeah.
but it's not the end. So I'm just like, yeah, let's focus on pro life, the babies, even pro life for the elderly who
Yes.
different countries are trying to just kill them off.
Yeah, well, what just
Um,
happened in the UK? I mean, like, what's happened in the UK recently? I'm still kind
right.
of in shock about the fact that, the assisted dying bill has gone through, and also now
Yeah.
abortion up until, I think, after birth is now legal.
Oh
Um,
my
yeah, I know.
goodness.
So that's not, it's funny because, it's such a hot topic in the States, and obviously, kind of American politics does take a lot of, I suppose, like the news time over here as well. But yeah, when I heard that, I actually haven't, I've actively not watched the news since I did my
Mm-hmm.
master's. So for about like 7 or 8 years, I don't watch the news. So people will say to me like, "Oh, do you know what's going on in Venezuela?" I'm like, "I've got no idea what's going on in
Venezuela.
Venezuela. Is it anything good? No, I didn't think so." Um,
You know,
so it's
all I
best,
know is,
yeah,
oh, it's just another thing to add to the prayer list. Okay, well,
yeah,
put Venezuela on there, but they were always on there in my heart, like just in
mm,
general, like the world,
yeah,
pray for the world. But okay, specifically, sure, Venezuela.
yeah,
Got it.
yeah. No, but I agree with you about the, if someone is pro life, because I think that's one of those issues that, um, it's really, once you are pro life. And I have to be honest, like when I was a feminist and I was at university, I wasn't, like, I was pro choice. And as soon as I had a child, like I wasn't even religious then, but as soon as I had my first daughter, I kind of, it clicked for me, and I thought, well, this
Mm-hmm.
is just evil. This is just, and also like realizing that motherhood is a joy, which is the opposite of what people tell you.
Yes.
um but yeah, there's definitely, that's one of those things where, like, one life at a time, if just you could change one mind at a time about abortion, that would,
And
make a huge difference.
in a sense, a spiritual sense, nuns are very much related to motherhood because we are spiritual mothers. And every one you see, whether they are the unborn, or they're 5 years old, or they're like 96, that is your spiritual child. And you're a lot of like different meditations that we do is like, I think I've talked about in your previous video of, as a nun, like virtues are my children with Christ, and I am supposed to bring these virtues to be born and
Mm,
to, through my actions and through my prayer. And then also spiritually, the people of the world are my children. And so I am all about, like, my whole life is supposed to be about suffering for them, just like a mother who gives up things. You give, you know like, you give your own, like, nourishment to the child in the womb and after they're born. You give up things so that way this child can have a good prosperous life. You
Mm.
give to them your Catholic faith so they can go to heaven. And so these things in the spiritual sense we do by, what we give up by living in Carmel. And there's a really great quote from St. Therese about, I'm not going to quote it correctly, but she says, "Give me all of the sufferings of monotony because this is greater than all the ecstasies. And just picking up the littlest straw out of love can save a soul."
Mm.
And so that had a good meditation for me today about the life of Carmel is very monotonous. Like, we have given up all the changings and goings about and excitement of the world to live in the same place with the same people doing the same thing every single day.
Mm.
And so we have lost any human ambition, any kind of, like, excitement with change because we're just going to do the same thing every. And so this giving up all of that is quite a suffering sometimes, and especially the monotony. And so that's our kind of, like, as a mother spiritually, I am giving up things so my children can prosper and go to heaven.
Mm.
So like, and that, like, real when I was discerning to be a nun and then being a nun, like, realizing that, because, like, every good Catholic woman has that innate nature of, like, to be motherly and to mother someone. And so, like, as a woman, like, when you're gonna be a nun, it's like, I love babies. I mean, other people's babies, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go marry Jesus, but babies are so cute. But it's like, so it's like, you kind of go through your little every woman who becomes a nun goes through this conflict, like, so. But then you realize, like, oh, I still have all these children
Mm.
from Jesus through, the world, or just like I said, virtues. Like, I always love to imagine this little baby named Patience because I can be very impatient. Like, I gotta go help little Patience today. So, yes. If we seem like we're crazy, we're living in the same place with the same people doing the same thing every day, I might be a little crazy, but, like, okay, sister, what are you doing? I'm imagining a Patience as a baby.
Yeah, but I mean, I
That's
also am in the same
great.
place with the same people every day. I mean, yeah, I'm out in the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm
Yeah.
also, I suppose, like moms, you might, is a different, yeah, kind of suffering. I suppose, like, suffering is the right word, but then it's also, when you realize your purpose and your vocation, I think that's what's so important about, kind of discerning that properly and kind of realizing, I think all women, and men, but I think, we're specifically talking about women, you realize that you're kind of like just called to sacrifice yourself for other people. And once you realize
Mm-hmm.
that there's like, it's not about you. Yeah, the fact that, like, you're tired as a parent, or the fact that, you don't get to go and like watch the movies, because you're in your monastery, that seems like a very small sacrifice when you know that, like, what you are doing is improving the lives of other people, um, in different
Yeah.
ways, obviously. But I agree with you. I think spiritual motherhood, it's not like defined by time and place. You can
Mm-hmm.
touch people's lives over a great distance, whether
And
you're.
that's another emulation of Our Lady because she is the mother of us all.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're imitating that aspect of her by being little mothers, little spiritual mothers to the world as well.
Yeah, it's funny that you say little mother, because that's what one of my friends. I don't know if you've read her book, Megan Madden, who wrote Mary, how to Mary, teach me how to be your daughter. But that's what she calls herself. She calls herself a little mother, like just trying to emulate Our Lady. Um,
Yeah.
but that's a big part of her book, is basically that all women are called to motherhood, but for some women it's spiritual motherhood. It's not always your own children. It's, you're kind of called to love people in a maternal way, in all kinds of ways, basically. Right, so that's the end of part one. I really hope that you enjoyed it. I look forward to seeing you all here in about a week's time for part two. And for that video, we're going to delve a little bit more deeply into how to introduce Carmel to children. This is something that I'm interested in because I have young girls, and I would love to think that in the future they might consider a religious vocation, or at least feel that it was something that was an option for them and something joyful. Obviously, I didn't grow up with faith, so this is all very new to me. So I did pick Sister's brains a little bit about that. And also, we discuss some recommended reading and other resources that Catholics can dive into to incorporate Carmel into their lives a little bit more and embrace that tradition as well.